Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Let's get started. Throughout the month, I always ask you, or actually, I don't even ask you. You all are constantly sending me tons of questions relating to the awakening, relating to metaphysics, paganism, witchcraft, activism, and a lot of times the answers are just so long and lengthy. I don't have the time to sit there and write a 2-page response to you. So most of the time, I'll just tell you, hey, keep an eye out for our hangout, and I'll answer your question live during the hangout. And today is the second one. Last week, we did get to cover about 8 of those questions. And this week, I'm going to try to answer the rest of them. I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And of course, if you have any questions during in the live broadcast on the chat room or in the comment section of Facebook. So I've got a very interesting, how shall I say, a very interesting question. Actually, somebody is saying they can't hear, so I want to make sure that all of our settings are correct. Trevor, you can hear okay? Okay. Ready? Anyway, so it seems that oh yeah, and I see my little thing working, so we should be okay. I got a very interesting question I want to start off with, and this is actually a very common question that we receive. Somebody asked me, am I going crazy, or is it a part of the awakening? Sometimes it's a little hard to tell the difference, and the reason why some people feel this way is that when you're going through the awakening, let's call it a consciousness awakening or a spiritual awakening, many times things that you believed in no longer make sense. Many times the veil has been lifted and you're seeing the truth of our society. You're discovering things aren't exactly the way that you thought they were, or that you were always told that they were. And that can kind of create a little bit of a psychic or a psychological crack, or a little bit of a break from your regular way of looking at the world. As well, many of us start to have, for lack of a better term, psychic abilities. Suddenly we're having lucid dreaming. Suddenly we're having out-of-body experiences. Suddenly some people can see spirits or other dimensional entities. And that can be very jarring. We're very lucky that we're going through this process right now as a planet where, the blinders are being removed. Yes, it's very uncomfortable. We're seeing a lot of the corruption of our government, of corporations, of industry, of religion, of particular people that we thought might have been leaders of our communities. So all the ugliness is coming up to the surface, and that can also be very frustrating, angering, ugly, and drive you a little crazy. So it's a great question. Am I going crazy, or is it a part of the awakening? And the short answer is going crazy is a part of the awakening. I'm sorry, but it's true. We are going to be thrown for loops. Many people are thrown for a loop. And the secret for me is to remain grounded. Now, how do we remain grounded when we're having anxiety attacks over what we just learned, or we're feeling very angry? There are many steps that you can take, and I feel the most important one, and I say this a lot, and I'm actually going to talk more about it from another question that's coming up, is being very vigilant to what you expose your senses to. A lot of times we're going to be caught up by specific radio shows or presenters or news media that really engulf us and keep our attention. And it's important that you have control over how much attention you give to that stuff. A lot of it is fearful. You know, let's face it. Some of these conspiracy shows and conspiracy presenters, they thrive off fear and scaring people. Like, oh, the tanks are rolling down the street next week, or oh, there's the Illuminati is going to kill you, and they're going to depopulate, and the chemtrails are killing you, and the GMOs are killing you, and everybody's trying to kill you. When in reality, that's only a small aspect of the totality of our reality. So, yes, there are good things and there are bad things happening, but what are you giving your attention to? So, how do you not go crazy? Uh, One of the words I use a lot is discernment. Use discernment. Can you trust the information you're receiving? And also, be honest and be gentle with yourself. Can you handle it? You know, many times we're hearing stuff that we just can't handle, and that might be a chance for you just to step back a little bit. A great example is, I use this example a lot actually. There's a book that someone gave me back when I was in my early 20s, when I just started going through my spiritual awakening. I was going through my training and my initiations, and I was gifted the book 777 by Aleister Crowley. That was way too much for me to handle at 22 years old and just going into my awakening. I had to put it down. It was too much for my energy. It was too much information that I really couldn't comprehend. So I had to put it down. And I picked it up. Yeah, actually, I just pick it up on occasion now and turn to a page, and it'll make sense to me now later. But so back to the question of, am I going crazy, or is it a part of the awakening? Shifting your reality can be a little scary. And what I say is just be gentle with yourself. No, you're not going crazy. How you respond to the new information, how you respond to the new abilities that you might be nurturing or becoming aware of, is the key of how not to go crazy. So I hope that answers your question. Anyway, I just want to take a peek here and see who's on. Oh, hi, Candace. It's so good to see you. Thanks for joining. All right, so let's move on to another question. Actually, this is great. This goes great with the last question I just covered. Somebody wrote me, is there really an Illuminati? Okay. Quite honestly, I'm so sick of that term. I've had it with that term. It's been so convoluted. And because it's been so convoluted, it takes away from the real, how shall we say, the real perpetuators of destruction on the planet. Uh, so let's break it down. What is the Illuminati? The Illuminati was a secret society created back, what was it, the 1700s by Adam Weishaupt. Now, remember, the original Illuminati that was created was to expose corruption of the church, corruption of the government. It was everything that a quote-unquote truther is today is what the Illuminati was back then. They were the truthers of that era. Did they participate in violence? Probably. From what I understand, maybe they were connected with the French Revolution, but they were a secret society, and eventually they were banned by all the governments, and thanks to the Pope, he got all the kings and the nations to ban any members of the Illuminati from being in their countries. So does that sound like they wanted one world government? I don't think so. Now, let's move to the modern day. Let's move to, maybe 50s and 60s of the 20th century, 1950s and 1960s. We started getting these back then it really was the alternative right, right-wing conspiracies coming up. And a lot of them had to do with like satanic panic, one of my favorite terms because so many people seem to use that to put fear into people. But there was this thing of, oh, look, they're Satanists. Look, they have a pentagram. They're Satanists, or they don't celebrate Christmas. They're Satanists, or they have a pyramid in their house. They're Satanists. They're Illuminati. And a lot of this, a lot of this came from the confusion that yes, there are secret societies out there. There are Freemasons. There are Rosicrucians. There are all kinds of secret societies and lodges, and within them, like any other community or group, there are some bad elements. There are people who utilize, for example, Freemasonry to get positions of control in their community or in their government or in the White House, literally. And we've seen many of these people who are in the higher echelons of power in the world usually do belong to some type of secret society. Now, are they evil? Is the entire system evil? I personally don't think so. Now, for me, coming from a pagan or Wiccan or whatever you want to call it perspective, I find the Illuminati or the Freemasons and whatnot are stuck within the paradigm of patriarchy. So you'll find if you ever go to one of my ceremonies celebrating the equinox or solstice, I have removed most of the Freemasonic influence that Gardner put into paganism, neo-paganism. I really don't want that patriarchal vibe or that patriarchal energy, because quite honestly, I believe that's one of the greatest issues that we have today as far as having peace and balance. For me, it is about raising up the matrifocal aspects of our society. But back to the Illuminati has become this generic term. It's almost become a joke of sorts that, oh, the Illuminati, look, he's wearing a triangle, he's Illuminati or whatnot. Are there satanic cults out there? I'm sure there are. Are there horrific pedophiliac, animal sacrificing organizations? Sadly, there probably are. I have never seen it myself. I don't know. So that's the other thing that I want to be very clear about when we're exploring these types of concepts, is to be very, very, very sure that you're not creating a reality built on speculation. While I may talk about meeting your spirit guides, channeling, tarot, spirits, magic, witchcraft, while I may talk about that, I know what I know from experiencing it. I don't take secondhand, anecdotes and make it a part of my reality. So when we have people like Alex Jones, or what's that other guy that's always making fun of people, Mark something or other, when we're taking their word as our truth, we have to be very careful. So everything we're hearing about, oh, they're Illuminati or they're satanic or whatnot, unless you actually know and have experienced it and have seen it with your own eyes, or there is someone, IRL in real life that who has been through it, I would take everything with a grain of salt. Don't make it your reality. Now, my reality, and I've seen it, is there is corruption in our government. My reality is I see the planet is being destroyed by corporations. And my reality, I see greed. I see people oppressing other people. I see classism. I see racism. I see instigation of anger and instigation of divisiveness, the divisiveness of our society through the media. Would that be considered evil? It depends what your concept of evil is, but I don't think it's for, the highest good of all. So who are the ones that are doing that? Would, we call them the cabal, we call them the 1%, we call them the elite, but let's be realistic of what they are and what they do, and take everything from our own personal experience. Don't be calling people Illuminati if you don't know they're Illuminati. And for that matter, let's stop using that term altogether because, again, my experience, Illuminati means, awakening, means illuminated, means against government, against, organized religion. It means freedom. Even the Freemasons have a great concept of a global brotherhood, or sisterhood, whatever you want to call it. Again, it's a little patriarchal for me, but let's get real about this Illuminati nonsense. It's just become an internet joke at this point, and use your mind. Don't live off speculation. Live off your experience and what you truly know. If you can't touch it, taste it, feel it, or sense it through your psychic ability, which a lot of people have now, then stop making it your reality. It becomes a part of the story. And what a horrible story that everyone's trying to kill us. Or no, I think they're just freaking greedy. And through their greed, they're putting out insecticides and pesticides and creating class division where poor people are dying and there's no medical care for people that need it. I mean, that's greed. That's plain old stinking greed. So you want to call it Illuminati? I call it greed. Does that make any sense? We'll be right back after this commercial break, guys. I hope we can get through all the questions. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com as well. We are simulcasting live on Facebook Live on my Facebook page. Today we are doing a Hermetic Hangout. We're just hanging out, talking. I'm answering some of your questions. If you do have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat on Revolution Radio, where Trevo will make sure I get them, and or in the comments section on Facebook Live. The next question I want to answer is a pretty, I want to say simple, but it's not simple. But it's one that I hear a lot. Somebody wrote me very simply, why can't I see spirits? I thought that was a great question. Many people, let me start off by saying that many people get frustrated by not experiencing what they expect to experience as they are progressing up along their spiritual path. If you're going through your psychic awakening or spiritual awakening, your intuition may get stronger. Some people have different gifts, and that gift is going to appear to you individually. What is your individual gift? My individual gift is my intuitive channeling ability, but it's even the way that I am an intuitive channel is different from how other people are an intuitive channel. So when we talk about these 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th senses, they're all going to be very different. So don't be frustrated if your friend can see auras and you can't. I can't see auras. I'm not clairvisual. Clairvisual would also probably be seeing spirits. Once in a blue moon, I'll see something out of the corner of my eye. When I was a kid, I saw quite a few spirits and ghosts and things like that, but that's because I was in an area or in a house that was fairly haunted. If you're in a haunted house, more likely you're going to see spirits. But it's not like Hollywood. It's not like the movies. It's not like The Craft or Charmed or Twilight or any of these other Hollywood, industrial complex, crazy supernatural films. I mean, the reality of it is when you are dealing with the esoteric or the supernatural. I don't even want to call it supernatural. I'll call it the extra awareness, awakening skills that we get and have and will develop. It's not going to be the same. Witches do not fly on brooms. No, you're not going to shoot fire out of your fingers. Some people aren't going to see spirits. Some people aren't going to hear spirits. Some people aren't going to feel them. The reality of it is that we all have individual gifts, and they will they'll come to the surface differently for everybody. If you really want to develop the ability to see spirits, there are exercises that you can do. The number one thing that I used to do when I was younger, and it did help me, even though I have a hard time with it, is being in complete darkness. If you can sit in complete darkness, what's that? You know those sensory deprivation tanks, something like that, might be very helpful to get out of this realm and be able to see through the veil. It's through the darkness that you can see through the veil. I remember one of the experiences I had during a meditative session that I had was my guides were telling me go into complete darkness to see through the veil, and I did it, and it was completely black. But then suddenly, I began to see different colors and lights, and eventually, that was when I started seeing the emissaries of light, my guides, come through, and it was a very wonderful experience. But it's not one that I go after so much anymore. And you know what? That leads me on to something else. When you do have an experience, let it go. Do not try to relive it. If you have a paranormal experience and it was a spontaneous paranormal experience, let it go. You're going to get more and more frustrated if you keep doing it over and over again, expecting the same result and not getting it. Now, is there benefit to having formulaic, magic spells, whatever you want to call it, techniques? Yeah, but if you're following the technique first and then having the experience, that is one thing. But if it's a spontaneous experience, more than likely you're not going to be able to relive that. So a lot of people get hung up on that one experience and trying to relive it, and they get very frustrated because they can't relive that experience. I hope that answers the question of why can't I see spirits. So, since I'm kind of like on a kick here with programming and Illuminati and whatnot, somebody did write me, how do I cleanse my consciousness from brainwashing? I love it. That is a wonderful, wonderful question. And yeah, I've got tons of videos out there. As a matter of fact, there is one called How Do I Deprogram Myself, or How to Get Rid of Programming. I forgot what I titled it. I did it a few years ago. It's really good. I Again, it's all about the awakening process. If we are going to deprogram ourselves or unbrainwash ourselves, we need to first acknowledge where and how we are brainwashed and or programmed. How does that happen? And I say this a lot, and I know I simplify it by saying it like this, but we all have a story. And within that story is your brainwashing and your programming. You have the story of what your life is, what your reality is, what your beliefs are, what you believe to be true, what you believe to be false. And again, I say it again, I say it all the time. Think about when somebody asks you, who are you? Or, what do you do? What do you do for a living? We have a story, and we begin to believe that story, and that is where the programming and brainwashing is. So the first step is to allowing yourself to create a new story. Letting go of old beliefs is very difficult. But if you research enough, if you study enough, if you practice enough, you can get rid of that old paradigm thinking. There's something called, what is it called? Not neurolinguistics. And I talk about it all the time, and I always forget the word, where our brain, our thoughts, and our beliefs have certain pathways. And for example, what you do every day, your habits. You have a habit, and within your brain creates a pathway for that thought process. When we can change that by doing something different, for example, instead of putting your left shoe on first, put on your right shoe first. It will change that neuro pathway. The same thing goes with brainwashing. And that's how brainwashing is done. It's the neural pathways get built. It's almost like treading a new path in the woods. You have to cut a new path in order to make it the energy and the focus flow easier on the new path, but you have to trod a new path, literally. Another way to help with deprogramming our consciousness or cleansing our consciousness is to take a fast. And when I mean a fast, I mean a consciousness fast. Everything you expose your senses to, everything you see, everything you hear, change it all. Stop it. Stop watching all Hulu programs. Stop listening to the music that you listen to. Take a 30-day break. Listen to some other music you never heard of. I went on a classical music break when I got out of pop music and whatnot. I had to listen to literally only classical music and quote-unquote ambient new age music. During my fast, I didn't listen to my Ozzy Osbourne, my Pink Floyd, or my Tom Petty or whatnot. I put that all aside for a month just to give my mind a break. Same thing with television. First of all, I threw away my television. I got rid of cable. And little by little, and actually it wasn't until about 2 years ago, well, when I decided, all right, I'll get Netflix. I forgot what was on there. It wasn't until about that time, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I've had Netflix now, that I've allowed myself to enjoy, programming. The old saying, they call it programming for a reason. But if you want to cleanse your consciousness from any old brainwashing, any old programming, you have to remove the stimuli that created that programming in the first place, whether it be your religion, whether it be your television, whether it be the music you listen to. Cut yourself off from everything. Be vigilant as to what you expose your senses to. I say this, I've said this in the past, a cute little anecdote. There's an ancient story, I believe it's a Hindu story perhaps, and correct me if somebody knows it and knows where it comes from. But there's a story of a small tree, and the small tree is in a big field with a bunch of sheep grazing. So when the tree is small, the farmer puts a fence around it, so the sheep don't eat it or trample it or whatnot. So you have to put a fence around it. But as the tree grows and gets bigger and gets stronger, it provides shade for all the sheep and for whoever's under the tree. So put a little fence around it at first. Put a little fence around your consciousness. Be vigilant. What do you allow into your subconscious, superconscious, higher consciousness? What's coming in? You can control it. You're the one that's in charge. You're the gatekeeper. What do you let into your eyes? What do you let into your ears? What do you let into your mind? It's all you. There's nobody forcing you to watch anything. There's nobody forcing you to listen to any particular program or music. You're the gatekeeper. Take responsibility and become vigilant what you expose your senses to in order to cleanse your consciousness and remove that old programming. And again, there is a video out there, my YouTube channel, youtube.com/justbernard. Just search for deprogramming or programming. Anyway, I think we have time for one or two more. Let's see if we can bang some of these out. Let me double check here and see what's going on. I wanted to say hello. Hi, Amy. Hi, Jocelyn. And let me see if there's any new questions that have popped up. Okay. So I'm going to go on and answer some of these emails that I got. Oh, wow. Oh, here's a great one. So, well, the question is, am I going to hell for giving up my beliefs? That's not a dumb question at all. I went through that. Again, programming, going back to that programming. So many of us, as we awaken, we find ourselves in a position where we no longer believe the nuns, the priest, the preacher, the pastor. The Bible stops making sense. And for some, maybe the awakening is through through the Christian and or Abrahamic patriarchal path, more power to you. But many of us seem to want to pull away from religious doctrine and dogma and whatnot. And when you've grown up in it, I mean, I grew up a staunch Catholic. I used to go to church almost every morning before I went to school. I would go to the chapel next to the main church and go to mass, and I just thought it was the greatest thing. And I even thought about becoming a priest. I did become a priest, just not a Catholic priest. So when I gave up my religious life, it was very difficult for me at first, especially when I discovered the goddess, when I discovered paganism. I did have that fear. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm going to go to hell? And yeah, there was a transitional period where my goddess was the Virgin Mary and my God was Jesus. And on my altar, I had Jesus and Mary as my God and goddess symbols for the masculine and the feminine. As I began to develop my relationship with my higher self, as I began to do further research, deeper understanding of religious history and how it all developed, the evolution of Christian dogma and the concept of hell, I would have to be a moron to ignore what I had learned of the concept and how the church had used hell as a way to control the masses. How even the stories of Lucifer and the devil are all recent mythological structures created, usually in a way to control people. So that's how I came to terms with the fact that I was not going to hell. Now, is there a hell? Is there a place? The Buddhists have a place called the Land of Hungry Ghosts. And if anything, there is this movie, What Dreams May Come, with Robin Williams. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Do I believe that when we die, we might end up in an unhappy place? You can, if you die very unhappy, just like in that movie. What a great anecdote or analogy of what hell is. The guy's wife ends up in hell. But, and I also believe that hell can be on earth due to I don't want to say our karma, but what we create for ourselves. I think we are more likely to go to a hell of our own creation than a place where this, mythological being with horns and fire is going to like torture you for eternity. I think it's more likely that we torture ourselves more than some, invisible, guy with a pitchfork, is going to hurt us. Again, as you study, as you learn more about these concepts, as you learn and understand the metaphysics of energy, the metaphysics of karma, the metaphysics of consciousness, you begin to realize that you're not going to go to hell. You're not. And I'll just say it. You're not going to hell for changing your beliefs. When you study historical truths and realities, you'll see that the concept of Satan or Shaitan was taken from the Quran. The idea of hell was taken, I believe, from the Old Testament or from old Israeli or Judea stories of it was like a land where they put all their garbage. It was like their landfill. And they would like exile people to that ugly, horrible area when they were bad. So I forgot if it was called Heil or whatnot, but please look these things up. I'm not just making this stuff up. So these concepts just evolved into something completely different, and then the church realized, hey, we can scare people into doing what we want and have them give us their money and let us be in control through fear. So let it go. There is no real hell. I can tell you that now. No other hell than the hell that you are creating for yourself. Be a good person, harm none, do what you will. When you die, most likely you'll transition into another form of consciousness, and continue your journey, whatever that journey may be. But we're not restricted to everlasting anything. The only thing we're restricted to is our infinite capabilities, infinite possibilities that we have the ability to create for ourselves. And actually, I've got time for maybe one more question. This is perfect. Are there really entities in other dimensions? Very good. Goes right along with what I'm talking about here. Are there really entities in other dimensions? Okay, so we talked about the devil. Um, the way I look at entities on other levels, there's different types of entities. Again, we talked about spirit guides. There are elementals. There are, fairies and sylphs and undines and dragons and all types of what we thought are considered mythological beings. I consider them to be elementals that just live on another realm. And they're natural. They're a part of nature. Those are nature elementals. Are there deities? I believe there are what we call gods. There are probably etheric manifestations and conscious thought forms that we created and or were a part of nature. The Mother Isis, the goddess Isis, or Mother Gaia. I believe they are some type of consciousness. Are there ETs and transdimensional entities? That is the only one I can say I know for sure is real, because I've experienced it. My guides, the emissaries of light, who describe themselves as one, I've seen them, I've met them, they've contacted me, they come through me, they come to me in my dreams, they've stood next to my bed. I mean, so I've experienced that, and I know that, yes, they do exist. But let me cover a little bit about what I believe of how we create these. And I think you might have heard me say this before, but they can be created as a conscious thought form created by a group of people. For example, is there a devil? Well, you know what? The only way I can say that the devil exists is because millions of people say it exists, and therefore some type of thought form is floating around the ethers that was constructed through everyone's energy, sending energy to this thought form that is supposedly the devil. That is why when I've read, real life accounts of like possession or whatnot, it'll call itself the devil, but it's not a devil. It's probably some little astral being, but it picks up on, everyone's thoughts, putting energy into this construct of the devil. But most of the time, they're just little astral or etheric parasites that just like cling on to people and make them say crazy things and do horrible self-destructive things or hurtful things to other people. But that all comes from the hundreds of millions of people over the centuries that keep saying, oh, the devil is real, the devil is real, the devil is real. So now you got this floating thing, this mass of blobby energy thinking it's the devil. Look, we have to be realistic of how these things exist. We have to be realistic as to, again, the metaphysics of it all. When people say, you're a metaphysician, what does that mean? You're not a physicist. I'm like, no, I'm a metaphysician. It's the same thing. It's physics, but the unseen physics of the world. And as a matter of fact, I love the definition that, magic and metaphysics are just science that have not yet been discovered. I understand chi, I understand energy, I understand thought, I understand the dynamics of of it all, just of it all. I don't want to go into too much deeper of that. I already lost my train of thought anyway. But understand it from a metaphysical point of view. How are these transdimensional entities real? On the other hand, there are people out there that are constantly saying, oh, the fairies took my keys, or, the brownies are living in my yard or whatnot. Are you really seeing them? Are you really seeing them, or are you just being silly? You know, a lot of people want to believe so bad that they create things that make absolutely no sense. Anyway, I wish we had more time, but we are out of time. I love you, everybody. I'll see you next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about compassionate capitalism and the difference between credit unions and corporate banks and the energy of prosperity. So I'll be back with that next week. I love you very, very much, and I'll see you then. Bye bye.